This is one of the Israeli regime's positions. Since the onset of the war against Syria, the South forces have been engaging intelligence services, those who have left their traces from Al-Jalil in North Israeli occupied territories up to Jordan's borders. Here is Quneitra, 70 kilometers away from Damascus, the capital city of Syria. This region borders the Golan Heights, which have been under the boots of the Israeli troops since the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Here is a strategic triangle. The flames of this triangle lick the east and south of Damascus, Lebanese borders, and Mount Hermon. The summit of this mountain cluster straddles the border between Syria and Lebanon. It's also the buffer zone between Syria and the Israeli-occupied territories. The southern slopes of Mount Hermon extend to the Israeli-occupied portion of the Golan Heights. The Israeli regime has built a wall known as the Jidar al-Tayyib in this strategic region in a bid to proceed into the east and west of Quneitra. But above all, it aimed to gnaw away at South Lebanon and Hezbollah in particular. Whatever happens in Qalaman, Hamas, and Al-Qusayr would have hard repercussions for Haifa and Tel Aviv, a fact that galvanized the Israelis into shaking hands with those involved in the war on Syria. Since the very beginning, it was clear that the Israeli regime was keen on having a hand in the war, despite all the efforts its officials made to seem impartial in this regard. Their reactions have run the whole gamut from complete silences to revealing remarks showing the depth of the Israelis' relations with the armed groups. Retaking the town of Al-Qusayr and its surrounding villages was a slap in the face of Israel and the al-Nusra Front and changed the war equations in Syria. Tel Aviv aimed to proceed into Lebanese borders so as to interrupt Hezbollah's resistance activities by helping terrorist groups. It was here in this place where the battle began officially. The Israeli regime instigated the armed groups in Quneitra to wage an all-out war on the Syrian government. They entered the villages around Al-Qusayr, with the help of reinforcements swarming from Jordan's borders. An attack was mounted on the town of Mojdaleh and Khanda Dam. The dam was the main aim of the Israeli regime, which was seeking ways to increase the level of water in the Yarmouk River. Given that the Israeli regime was unlikely to fulfill its aims in this region, the armed groups invaded the Quneitra crossing after the Israeli troops opened the roads running to the Golan Heights in Syria. But their initial attempts ended in failure. We are now at the Quneitra crossing. Here is the last point where the Syrian army is positioned. The armed groups have declared that they have taken this crossing, but as you can see, the Syrian army still has this strategic point under control. These positions are occupied by the Israeli regime. UN and Red Cross personnel are also present here. This area has been mined for a long time. The armed groups tried to infiltrate into this area, but the Syrian army confronted them and pushed them back into the Israeli-occupied territories. Needless to say, they were helped by the Israeli army when retreating from this area.
هذا أول واحد تل اليوان بعده تل أحمر. هذا التل شو هذا؟ هذا خزان. جنبه تحته مباشرة جنبه تل الصاحي.
This barbed wire fence encircles the Syrian-occupied Golan Heights, a safe haven for the armed groups. The Israeli regime set up the fence to protect the armed groups shuttling between Barika and Bir Ajam. Here on this hill, the positions of the Israeli army are only a few meters away from the barbed wire fence.
وهذا الموقع موقع إسرائيلي. هذا طبعا هذا تل محتل اسمه تل أبو الندى. مرصد إسرائيلي. بالإضافة للدعم اللوجستي والدعم يعني في شيء علني يعني نحن غير أنه اللي عم يذيعوه إنه المشافي الميدانية وخلافه أكيد في دعم لوجستي ودعم بالعتاد والأسلحة هذا وتنسيق تام يعني.
We get closer and closer to the border areas, to be exact, to Al-Ghahtaniya, where the armed groups have made some progress with the help and support of the Israeli army. These groups owe their progress to the Israeli-made crossings.
هذيك دبابة إسرائيلية. أيوة. قرب قرب قرب. هذاك الشريط وين مخصوص مبين هيك. حزم هذا. حزم مبين. عميل زوم على الدبابة الإسرائيلية. أيوة تحت الشريطين هني. تحت منها على اليمين مفتوح الشريط. مبين لك. مبين معاه. الدبابة بين بدي الشريط المفتوح.
We're now in the town of Al-Ghahtaniya. Here is the town where the armed groups did their best to infiltrate. Over there are the Israeli-occupied lands, and this is the border strip between the occupied and liberated lands. The armed groups tried to enter the area from this point. The armed group's failure to enter the Quneitra crossing engaged the Israeli regime and resulted in the dismissal of their commander Salim Idris. He was replaced by Abdullah al-Bashir, a fugitive brigadier. The Israeli regime has acknowledged that al-Bashir has been trained in Tel Aviv to carry out missions against the Syrian government.
إقالة اللواء سليم إدريس من عمله كرئيس للأركان. ثانياً، قرر المجلس العسكري الأعلى تعيين العميد الركن المجاز عبد الإله البشير.
Al-Bashir had undergone treatment inside Israel. At the time, he was the commander of the opposition groups in South Syria. But when the Supreme Military Council of the Free Army dismissed Salim Idris, he was appointed as the chief commander of the Free Army. The Israeli army failed to hide the evacuation of the injured members of the armed groups to Israeli hospitals. Rescue teams are kept on standby near the villages where the armed groups are fighting. go around that a large number of injured terrorists are being evacuated to Israeli-occupied territories.
يعني صار في جرحى تفوت على إسرائيل يعني من العام الماضي يعني توقعت إنه ممكن بأي لحظة واحد يتعرض لإصابة ممكن إنه يدخل على إسرائيل. جبهة النصرة يعني مو بهذيك السوء هي اللي واصلة عنها السوء، إحنا يعني عايشين جبهة النصرة هناك يعني. يعني جبهة النصرة يعني هناك يعني شو بدي أقول لك يعني تحل بعض المشاكل بين الناس، ممكن إنها كونها يعني إسلامية تحل بعض المشاكل.
أخذوا الجرحى والقتلى تبعونهم اللي سقطوا هون واتجهوا باتجاه
دخلوا داخل الأراضي المحتلة.
طبعا إسرائيل سهلت لهم، فتحت لهم المعبر وهربوا.
فتحت لهم المعبر ودخلوا إلى الأراضي المحتلة.
دخلوا جوا طبعا هن أثناء الهجوم دخلوا من جهة إسرائيل، يعني الجيش إنه متوقع القوات من الاتجاه المعادي للمسلحين، لكن هن دخلوا من الشريط الإسرائيلي وخرجوا من الشريط الإسرائيلي. وهذا أمر هون بمنطقة كثير يعني الإسرائيليين عم يدخلون وطلعون سواء من جهة الأردن أو من اتجاه لبنان بتسهيل من العدو الإسرائيلي.
The Israeli regime paves the way for them and provides them with medical treatment and military training. Israeli helicopters, ambulances, and hospitals are at their complete disposal when injured.
واحنا بنشكركم يعني.
مليئة رخاء تودع. يا بغير أخي خشب. سلامتك.
الله يعطيكم العافية يا رب. مشكورين الله يعطيكم العافية.
At that time, that kind of cooperation was revealed in a different way. The overt visit Netanyahu made to the injured at the hospital and his talking with them was a clear sign for all that the armed group had never been alone and they had always had the Israeli support with them. At the time, the Israeli regime was increasing its support for the groups through many byways that the Israeli engineers had made. Through those byways, they could enter the Israeli-occupied territories well protected. Through those byways, they could move a large number of fighters to the Israeli-occupied territories for arming and training.
ما فاتوا؟
فاتوا من الشريط جوا. والشباب كانوا متوزعينها. استشهد ملازم أولها. وفاتوا في قسم فات من تحت.
يعني كان في من جهتين.
كذا جهة.
With the growing number of the injured, the Israeli regime had no choice but to build a field hospital near the village of Sahita in the Golan Heights. And a major conflict in Jubata al-Khashab area and a hospital that accepted the injured and gives them basic treatment. Everyone in need of treatment was sent to hospitals in Safad and Al-Jalil. Communication equipment couldn't help the armed groups escape from the prying eyes of the Syrian soldiers. Therefore, the Israeli army provided them with eavesdropping equipment. The equipment the occupying forces set up played a crucial role in the armed conflicts in Quneitra and its surrounding villages. In addition, the armed groups were covered by artillery fire when proceeding through the crossing. Under the auspices of the Israeli regime, the armed groups proceeded and hoisted up the Nusra flag. And then they were guided to enter the ruined city and to proceed from there to Al-Hamidiyah, Al-Hurriya, and Al-Samdaniyah, while their focus was on the strategic hills. But in the end, it was the Syrian army that had all the hills under control.
من حرش صنوبر هونيك البوابة المعبر الرئيسي له. أيوة في حرش صنوبر غربي منه آخر مبين في مثل إطلال بيض. من هذا هي المعبر. صح. معبر لهم هذا.
بفوتوا على الأرض المحتلة بيرجعوا بيه. وهيدا الأنتين اللي هون هو ده مرصد إسرائيل.
أيوة هذا مرصد إسرائيلي وهدول لا كلهم مراصد إسرائيلية.
تل صدر العروس هذا اللي يسموه. تل صدر العروس هذا.
هذا في مهبط طيران شيء يعني؟
إيه هذا مهبط طيران.
لأنه رسمين طيارة هونيك.
تل صدر العروس هذا اسمه.
Then the Syrian army carried out its mission in the west and northwest suburbs of Daraa, trying to disconnect the flow of Israeli support and put an end to their control over the two provinces of Daraa and Quneitra and the occupied Golan Heights. The Israeli regime increased its support for the Nusra Front in South Syria. Moreover, auxiliary equipment was added to the Golan Heights to keep it strong enough. This area runs in parallel with the Yarmouk Valley in the south and Majdal al-Shams in the north. The regime also carried out more intelligence missions in the whole Golan Heights after declaring it a closed military zone, and particularly after many armed groups retreated from Qalamum and Zobdani to join their comrades in the Nusra Front. The armed groups also retreated from East Ghouta after the fall of Maliha and its surrounding towns. This is the very Jidar al-Tayyib that the Israeli regime had pinned its hopes on. This is the new and the old dream of the Israeli regime, because it tries to wage a war on Syria from this area, and then to extend it to other parts of South Syria, including the liberated parts of the Golan, an area that begins from the west suburbs of Daraa, two villages of Saham al-Jawlan and al-Rafid, and continues to other villages in Quneitra to Tel Ahmar Hills, which is in the front of Tal Abu an-Nada, where the Israeli army monitors every movement, to villages of Hadar and Arna and Ghalat al-Jandal at the foot of Mount Hermon, which the Syrian army and its allies have under control, to Ghalamun mountain. This area is about 70 kilometers and includes tens of villages from South Daraa to the summit of Mount Hermon. This area is not a buffer zone, and UN forces have no control over it. Instead, it has become a safe haven for the armed groups, equipped with Israeli weapons. They can enter the occupied territories and move from there to the Golan Heights and Sheba area in Lebanese borders. This way, the Nusra Front can move easily from one point to another and take a detour to avoid resistance forces. This condition prompted the Lebanese resistance to carry out a mission on October 7, 2014, to draw once more confrontation fronts in the area. On the other hand, the Israeli army wanted to convert this triangle into a golden place where it could fulfill what it couldn't in other areas and put the Lebanese resistance under pressure. It was time for the resistance to stand up against such geomilitary changes and monitor the activities of the Israeli army in the area from up close. As the resistance began its intelligence mission in the area, the Israeli army realized it was unlikely to fulfill its dream here. Therefore, in a desperate attempt, it attacked Alamal farms in the northeast of the village of Ovania to target some Hezbollah forces on an intelligence mission in the area. The attack claimed the lives of 6 resistance forces and 1 brigadier from the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. A few days later, the resistance drew its plans anew, a mission with the same tactics and at the same time. to begin a new era when borders have no value after being soaked with the blood of the Lebanese and Iranian resistance forces. The battle begins, and the reality turns into a triangle of fire. Since the onset of the war against Syria, the South forces have been engaging intelligence services, those who have left their traces from Al-Jalil in North Israeli-occupied territories up to Jordan's borders. This is one of the Israeli regime's positions. The summit of this mountain cluster straddles the border between Syria and Lebanon. It's also the buffer zone between Syria and the Israeli-occupied territories. The southern slopes of Mount Hermon extend to the Israeli-occupied portion of the Golan Heights. The Israeli regime has built a wall known as the Jidar al-Tayyib in this strategic region in a bid to proceed into the... Here is Quneitra, 70 kilometers away from Damascus, the capital city of Syria. This region borders the Golan Heights, which have been under the boots of the Israeli troops since the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Here is a strategic triangle. The flames of this triangle lick the east and south of Damascus, Lebanese borders, and Mount Hermon.